Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Carefulist the podcast. We are incredibly excited to have Kate Granigan with us today. She is the CEO of Life Care Advocates and president of Aging Life Care Association. Welcome, Kate.
Good morning and thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am really looking forward to this conversation. I think we have a lot of good things to cover. So
Great.
I think we can just start by hearing your personal caregiving story. Where did that begin?
Sure. Well, I think like many of us, I'm in that sort of sandwich generation where, I am working in the field of aging as a professional, have been for about now 27 years. But in the midst of that, of course, I am also a daughter, a daughter-in-law, a niece. I'm a mom of two grown kids. And I have been a caregiver and remain a caregiver along the journey as well. And so my initial real caregiving journey started when an aunt and uncle who lived about an hour and a half away from me and have no children began to show signs of issues related to aging.
Mhm.
They were very proud, very professional people. My uncle is actually a lawyer and a president of a college, had retired from that, but was working in a hospital as an ethicist on their panel. And we began to notice that he was struggling. It was little things. He was very bright and good at hiding it, but we began to notice he was showing signs of cognitive decline. And in the
Mhm.
meantime, my aunt, who again felt the need to sort of keep that quiet, was not sharing the challenges until one day when she called me a bit upset and frantic because not only was he having cognitive issues, but he was falling, had other issues that were leaning towards something more than just,
Mhm.
aging. Fast forward, I began to get involved in their care, advocating for them in getting some diagnosis for him and eventually getting him some treatment. But ultimately, his cognitive decline continued, and part of his issues were related to an Alzheimer's diagnosis.
Okay.
So that was tough. And so, but even if I'm in this field, I'm a niece in that setting.
Yeah.
And so while my aunt and uncle were happy to have my support, they weren't always pleased with the things I was asking them to do. Right on the heels of his diagnosis, my aunt actually began herself to show signs for what I knew because of my professional experience was the beginnings of Parkinson's disease.
Ah.
So while he was, progressing in his disease, she began to rapidly progress. So
Mhm.
I was finding myself in the middle of I'd be in the middle of a meeting getting a call that one of them had fallen. They were in the ER. I would, quickly excuse myself and get in the car and drive an hour and a half to manage all of this.
Mhm.
And so fast forward a little while after that, I started looking for a professional in the area to help me.
Mhm.
I'm an aging life care professional by trade. I'm a clinical social worker, and I know the value of having someone objective on the team that also can help be sort of boots on the ground if you live at a distance. So I hired myself an aging life care manager in the area to help with caring for them. And that care, we say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mhm.
That journey of caring went on for
Yes.
about 7 years total before they both one passed and then the other. So
Yeah.
that was my one recent but very involved experience. I'm also still I'm a daughter of an 87-year-old that lives at a distance from me, and also the daughter-in-law of a mother-in-law who's in her 80s and her sister who live together about 5 minutes from me,
Mhm.
and they're in their 80s. And so we have the aging and caregiving challenges going on around me, circling my professional experience on a regular basis. So that's the nuts and bolts of how I am an actual personally a caregiver.
Right. Oh, and it's so common to have,
Yeah,
pardon me,
yeah. Mhm.
more than one person at a time.
It
And
is.
when that happens, it's not double, it's exponential,
Yeah,
right?
very true.
Um, and then when you factor in the distance and trying to figure out how you're going to care for them, and then you also have your family at home. It
That's right.
is an unimaginable challenge for people who
Yeah.
haven't gone through it. There's
Yes.
no good way to explain it, right?
I would agree. I think people, people often even don't realize they're on the caregiving journey. They
Yeah,
sometimes start out small, right? They're maybe, bringing groceries or picking up meds or, checking in on someone. They're doing a little more than they had because that person's slowly needing some more help. And it sort of builds, and sometimes people won't even identify that they're a caregiver,
right.
until the crisis hits. And then all of a sudden they realize that they are the person that older adult is relying on. But
Yes.
I would suggest, and we work hard to help people recognize that role,
Hmm.
because it really is it is a marathon, not a sprint. It's often multiple marathons at a time, as we noted, and so really knowing where you are in that,
Hmm.
understanding the resources at each phase, and then ideally gathering information to proactively manage the next step. So what's on the path ahead can really
Hmm.
be invaluable to help people from feeling sort of out of touch and overwhelmed to aware and supported and an educated consumer.
Yeah. So you have this experience personally and you have this experience professionally.
Yeah,
And you were just managing the importance of understanding the resources that are available to you.
right.
So, in my experience, I learned that it seems like there is a difference between different agencies and the types of care that you can receive. So, and in our conversation, you've illustrated that there is non-medical care and
Right.
then medical care. Can you talk a
Right.
little bit about the differences there?
Sure. So a lot of people may be familiar with the Visiting Nurse Association, which is a blanket term. There are many visiting nurse associations that provide that medical care. It's care covered by Medicare, typically. This is usually it's in response to an acute medical issue related to someone having maybe a surgery, an illness, a fall, or a decline in some way that requires them to get some medical care that might need to happen in the hospital or in a rehab initially. But then
Mhm.
if they're returning home, there may still be a need for some services for a small period of time. That is the Visiting Nurse Association, and those services are ordered by a doctor. They have certain requirements, including home balance status. Somebody
Mhm.
needs to be at home and unable to go to see a doctor or go to see a physical therapist. So those services come to you ultimately. And
Mhm.
it typically is started with a nurse who comes to your home and assesses and evaluates what you need. They will often recommend that you have a home health aide come in and help you if need some assistance getting in and out of the shower after hip
Mhm.
surgery, or you may not be able to, do some activities of daily living for a period of time. So they may say, as part of our services, we'd like you to have a home health aide come to you. We're going to bring in a nurse once or twice a week to check your wound or make sure you're progressing, help you understand your medications. And we might be bringing in a physical therapist once or twice a week to help you get back on your feet and able to move around independently. So
Mhm.
that's a covered service typically by your insurance, and then that is delivered at home, and ordered by a doctor. The
Okay.
important thing to know about that is that's not a long-term solution. Those are we call they're intermittent for acute situations, and
Mhm.
they're time limited. So that association, that visiting nurse is going to know Medicare guidelines, and when you reach your baseline again, or they believe there's no further growth that you can make or advancement
Mhm.
in your situation, they then will discontinue that service. And
Okay.
so, and that's sometimes misunderstood by people. They don't understand that Medicare doesn't cover long-term support in the home. And that's really where those non-medical, typically providers, come in. These are
Mhm.
nurses' aides, certified nursing assistants, home health aides that work typically in an agency. That
Mhm.
agency, you pay privately for their assistance. Typically, they like to, those services are hard to get 1 hour at a time. They're typically a block of time. It might be 2 or 3 hours. And that individual actually has a lot more flexibility in what they can do for you
Mm.
and for your, for your family member in the home. These folks typically can, assuming they have a car or they can drive the client's car, they can take a client to a hair appointment or to the grocery store with them. They can do things in the home that might not be covered or not or available in that 1 hour that the home health aide comes out that's covered by the VNA. So
I see.
there's a lot more flexibility. They also typically, the home health aides that work in those settings, they depending on how they're cared for by the company, you can look at somebody. You ideally will get a consistent person. At
Hmm.
least that's a fair expectation. If you're going to have somebody come in 3 times a week and your mom's home to help, for 4 hours, it's fair to say, I'd like to get the same person or the
Yes.
same one or two people. You have a
Mhm.
little more opportunity to design your care plan and your engagement with that type of service because you're paying for it.
Mhm.
And they operate in a different way. So those are
Yeah.
some guidelines that hopefully help you to sort of differentiate.
Yeah. Well, and I think that consistency is so important for a number of reasons.
Sure.
Building a relationship between your loved one and the person who is in the home helping to take care.
Yeah.
But also because you want the person who is giving the care
Yeah.
to learn the nuances and the quirks of what they're dealing with and
Right.
not have to repeatedly explain the situation and yourself because that gets exhausting. And then you're like, well, why do I even have this help if I have to keep going over
Right.
this and talking to someone new?
That is exactly what we hear from families. The frustration of that is paramount to
Hmm.
sometimes to people, leaving their job and saying, forget it, I'll just be the caregiver, or, really feeling exhausted by this role
Yeah.
is that, the inconsistencies, the revolving door of caregivers, if you will.
Hmm.
Some of that is, unfortunately, some of that is unavoidable, and it really we've seen just such a shortage in caregivers that are out
Hmm.
there in that paid role. The pandemic really exaggerated that challenge.
Yeah.
This is a role that is a difficult job to start with. It
Hmm.
is not highly paid, and often not highly appreciated. And
Hmm.
and so these are folks doing work that is often very challenging, and yet they're not particularly appreciated. And
Right.
so when we're looking to guide families to those services, we really want to help them make sure that they're finding quality agencies
Hmm.
and asking questions. Ask how do you take care of your caregivers? How are they paid?
Hmm.
How are you ongoingly supporting them in training and education? A
Yeah.
lot of those things really matter. And what we find is the agencies, the home care agencies that are willing to invest in their caregivers are ones that have quality caregivers that are loyal, that have some longevity, and feel connected to the job. They're getting
Yeah.
support. They're not feeling like they're on an island when they're working with someone who has, challenging behaviors and they're spending 12 hours a day with somebody
Yeah.
without support. So asking questions as you hire, as you begin to evaluate, is
Hmm.
really is critical to getting involved with a quality company that you want to be taking care of your mom or dad.
Yeah. And so you raise a good point, and this leads me to a question that I was asking myself and talking with my
Yeah,
siblings about when we were going through our journey with my mom.
sure.
Um, what are the signs that it's time to
Yeah,
look for a professional caregiver? How do you know
sure.
when you should get on that
Yeah,
road?
yeah. You know, I think it's often time way before people recognize that.
Hmm.
I think the questions to think about are, you know, first of all, how are mom and dad doing, or how is mom or aunt or, doing in their setting?
Hmm.
How are you noting their environment? Are they, are they able to make a meal? Are they aware of, what's expired in their fridge? Are they able to get their own, groceries or supplies?
Mhm.
Are they looking a little bit disheveled when they were pretty tidy, and their that appearance was important to them.
Mhm.
Are you noticing that the house is not quite as kept as it used to be? Has mom or dad had a fall recently, and it was because they were trying to do something that was unsafe?
Yeah.
And then are you, daughter, son, niece, granddaughter, the one who's running, sort of regularly to put out fires? Are
Right.
you getting the call in the middle of the night because they're awake and confused? Are
Hmm.
you, are you the one that now, on top of taking care of your own family, your job, and yourself, ideally, are you the one now that are filling those gaps?
Hmm.
And without necessarily naming it, if you were really to sit down and think about it, are you getting burnt out? Are you getting
Yeah.
resentful? Are you feeling short fused when you get over there for the fourth time in a week because they're saying no, they don't need help, but then inevitably there's something going wrong. So
Right.
those are some good indicators that it might be time to start thinking about having a caregiver,
Hmm.
that's going to back you up or give you a break.
Yeah.
Um, and we also work with spouses, who we have one of the spouses are the well spouse and the other's declining. They may have
Yes.
a diagnosis of Parkinson's or dementia or Alzheimer's, type dementia, and the spouse is picking up all the slack. The spouse is the
Mhm.
one who now, really can't go out as they had to meet friends. They can't
Yep.
travel to see grandchildren, without feeling guilty or worried.
Hmm.
Their loved one goes out to do the regular route to the coffee shop to meet his buddies and gets lost and is gone for 5 hours and brought back by the police. These
Hmm.
things are all things that begin to show, and as I said, if that's the actual experience, it's probably likely the nuances were there much before that,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So, but those are some of the things that might indicate that it's time to evaluate having
Hmm.
a caregiver.
Yeah. And you just said something that made me think of a phrase that I've started using, um, particularly for spouses who are helping take care of their partner,
Right.
um, homebound by proxy,
Yeah.
right? So,
So
like,
true.
you're perfectly
Yeah.
healthy and capable of going out, but you can't
Yeah.
because you're concerned about leaving your spouse or your loved one home
Right.
by themselves. So, your quality of life and your world shrinks to
Right
become
along.
their
Yeah.
world. And
Absolutely.
so it's so important that if that's happening to you,
Yeah.
that you reach out because your quality of life matters. And it doesn't mean that you love your partner any less,
Right.
but you can't take care of them if you're not well. So,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay. So
very, very good point.
if someone is hearing this and they're going, oh, okay, that's me. What do
Right.
they do next? What steps do they take to start looking into this? What questions should they ask?
Sure. So, here's where I will just speak a little bit about our role in my company, and my role as the president of the National Association that has folks that do what I do across the country.
Okay.
So what the role that we play is called Aging Life Care Manager. We rebranded as a practice or as a profession probably 10 years ago now. The word that people may hear has been called a geriatric care manager.
Okay.
The reason we rebranded is probably obvious. The word geriatric isn't all that appealing. And the reality is we work with people who are much younger than I would consider. The older I get, the less I like the word geriatric, quite frankly.
That's not for
We're all
you.
ages.
That's for people who are
Yeah,
older.
that's later, right? And so we found that people didn't relate to what we did because they didn't see themselves as geriatric. And so what we know is the earlier we can help people begin to anticipate the path of aging,
Yes.
and understand the resources and navigate that well to the
Mhm.
best of their ability, the better their experience is, whether it's the older adult themselves or the family or both, the
Mhm.
support system. And so here's where the work of a care manager, an aging life care manager comes in. So in our practice, life care advocates, we're here in Massachusetts, and I have a team of about 17 folks who are, and by and large, the role of a care manager is a health and human service professional. So
Mhm.
my team are master's level social workers, as I am. I have nurses, I have physical therapists, occupational therapists, but they're elevated their experience by being certified and engaging in life care management. And what that
Mhm.
means is our background is not just what we're trained and licensed in, but we've gone ahead and understand sort of the holistic experience of aging. We know and understand where the healthcare and the health system, insurances, all of those things, and how to navigate that. We understand housing options, whether people begin to look at staying at home or do I need to relocate? So our experience expands into knowing all of those things, home
Mhm.
care and healthcare, how to navigate that, the sort of the setting in which we should be thinking about the legal needs,
Mm.
way
Yes.
before hopefully you need it. All of those kind of things. We understand financing and finance, so we need to understand in general terms the client's finances so we can make appropriate recommendations and we can help them and their planners, maybe their financial planners, their lawyers. Our job is to help really assess all of these parts of the older adult, their family, and their system so we can
Mhm.
give objective professional recommendations that match their needs. So, really, what an aging life care manager does if a family decides to start there
Mhm.
is help really take the whole story and get the lay of the land in the picture, including
Mhm.
meeting with the older adults and understanding how are they doing in the home? How safe is the home? Are there things if they want to be there that we can do to make that safer? Or if it's time to move, they want to relocate near their daughter across the country in an assisted living or an independent living, then we need to help them navigate that path. So that's really what some families who contact us or people like us across the country really see us as the quarterback. We're going to help them understand not just the caregiver that should come in the home, but likely if a caregiver is needed, there are other needs you should be considering. And
Yes.
so our job is to help really paint that picture, help you
Mhm.
find the right resources, and then kind of hand you the roadmap if you're the daughter or son and family members and say, here's the way we think you might want to go. Here's the pros
Mhm.
and cons of these choices. Here's the costs of these choices. And here are our connections in the area that we know because we work with
Yeah.
them every day are the ones that are going to fit your needs. So
Right.
that's really a way that an aging life care professional can help you begin that path. You don't
Mhm.
then have to know all the questions because we know the
Yes.
questions. And
Oh,
so that's one way we guide and can support caregivers on that journey.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's amazing. So, one of the pieces of research that I found when I was starting the Carefulist, and this was just my personal experience,
Mm,
caregivers spend so much time trying to figure out what their person needs and where they can
correct.
get it. And the statistic is really old. It's from 2011, but it says that on average, caregivers spend at least 13 hours every month
Yeah,
trying to get this kind of information pulled together. So if they can use a resource like this,
that's right.
that that amount of time you get back, everybody kind of rolls their eyes at self-care for caregivers because when are you going
Yeah,
to do that?
yeah,
But this is an opportunity where you can get some time back. And even
that's
if you don't
correct.
use it for self-care, you use it for quality time with your loved one instead of
Right.
paperwork and
Yeah,
questions and making appointments, and
that's right.
you can have a real relationship again
Yeah,
rather than sort
yeah,
of like almost this business partnership that it kind of turns
that's
into.
right.
Yeah.
You've hit the nail on the head there. It really is about getting people time back. It's also getting quickly to an answer that might take you hours, and we know it and
Yes.
can give you the information in 15 minutes because this is our expertise. Our job
Mhm.
is to know the ins and the outs of the communities in our area, the home care. What are the questions you're going to ask? navigating and coaching caregivers to having the hard conversations with mom or dad.
Right.
All these things are things that we do every day. And so we tell, the families that work with us, we really talk about the fact that your mom and dad best, but we know the industry, we know the path. We've
Hmm.
actually traveled this with, hundreds and hundreds of others, in
Hmm.
this last year. And this is your first go at it. So let us get
Right.
you to answers quickly. And so that's also some value. Um, it is important to note that the services we provide are not covered by insurance. When you're hiring, by and large, I will say there's always caveats.
Hmm.
Some long-term care insurances do cover the care manager role. So
Hmm.
everybody should, if you have a policy, it's very quickly to look and see if there's a resource in there that would pay for that. But by and large, it's like hiring a consultant in any field,
Hmm.
that we are paid by the hour for our time and expertise. But as you noted, you may pay a little for us, but you can save a lot. And both
Yes.
both in your time and energy and well-being, but literally in dollars and cents, because sometimes families don't they don't know what they don't know, and so they find themselves making choices that end up costing them money.
Yes.
They move somebody into the wrong building, because they got some advice from someone that wasn't maybe clinically assessing mom or dad's needs. The marketing and salesperson who is doing their job said, "Oh, sure, your mom fits in perfectly here," only to
Hmm.
find out it's not the right level of care and they need now to move, or now you need to bring in additional paid help. So there are expensive mistakes that can be made.
Yes.
And so I think for all those reasons, using an aging life care manager as a team member with you and your family, or, so many people we talk to are also the sole caregiver,
Hmm.
and sometimes for multiple people. And so, having their own sounding board or support that's not
Hmm.
emotionally connected, that doesn't have, we also, important to note, an aging life care manager does not take a referral fee. You're paying us because we are working for you. And so we're not getting paid by an assisted living where you move.
Hmm.
We're not free and then we'll get a referral fee if you use this service or move into this location. We're strictly giving you information that is vetted and appropriate based on our assessments and our work together, for you and for your loved one.
Right. And that's something very important to note. So if you are looking at a free service,
Yeah,
it's not free.
right.
They get paid
They
somehow,
get
right?
paid.
So if you're
That's
not
right.
paying for it, someone is, and
Yeah,
it typically comes in a referral fee. So the more
yeah,
people that they place or suggest to a certain facility, um, that's how they get paid. So
right.
just be aware of the fact that you might not be getting an unbiased opinion
That's
from
right.
a free resource like that.
Yeah, you perfectly put. That's exactly right. And I think, the reality is sometimes people work with us for 1 hour Zoom consultation so they can
Mm.
get their family all on the same page as they approach mom or dad because they're
Mm.
noticing things.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're giving a coaching session to a family member as they take mom or dad to, a medical appointment and need some guidance around what to ask, what should you, be advocating for.
Mhm.
There are all kinds of ways that can be pretty inexpensive and yet really valuable as people navigate this road.
Right. And so this also got me thinking, my sister and my brother were close to my family, um, to my parents rather,
Yeah,
proximity wise. I
right.
live a few hours away. So for people who don't have anyone local, this, because it's a national resource, you
That's
can
right.
get care that is local to your loved one and
Yeah,
still have very open communication and know
that's right.
that they're being taken care of.
Yeah, and that, the long distance caregiver, even long distance, as I indicated, that an hour and a half or you with a couple hours,
Mhm.
that's a disruptive, process. If you have to
Yes.
hop in the car every time, something happens, even if it's just, maintenance on the house, a water main breaks, or, you need something fixed or done. Never mind there's been a medical emergency. So having an aging life care manager on your team,
Hmm.
especially if there's really no one in the area that can take on a role of taking someone to a doctor's appointments to be another set of eyes or ears, or meeting someone in the ER if they've had a fall and you are a plane ride away. um,
Hmm.
we play that role and much more. A lot of times we help when somebody's now in an assisted living or in a skilled nursing or rehab, and the daughter has to go back to work, and so
Hmm.
we can fill in as the person going to a care plan meeting, or going in periodically to check on the care and making sure that what they say they're doing. Because
Hmm.
we're working for you, we're unbiased and objective, and our job is to make sure our clients are getting what they need, in
Hmm.
every and any setting. And so our role as an advocate, a stand-in, a lot of families say, you're an extension of our family, and
Hmm.
then we send the email chain to all of, an update, or we text the daughter and let her know, or, we get in a meeting and then we call a daughter on FaceTime so she can join,
Hmm.
virtually,
Yeah.
all those things. And what our role is evolving all the time because our clients' needs are changing and the
Right.
resources are changing. And so our role is to be up to speed on all of those things. So our clients can benefit from, our ongoing knowledge, education, staying on top of things and knowing. And then also we have a national resource. So as president of the Aging Life Care Association, when I said we cover all of Massachusetts and southern New Hampshire, but if I have a client who calls me and says, I'm here in Boston, but my mom lives in Florida and I want to move her back here. And
Hmm.
how do I begin to do that? I don't even know where to begin. So,
Hmm.
they may hire us to be their quarterback because we know Boston and she's going to land here, but we need somebody in Florida to
Hmm.
do an assessment. So I know I can match the right community. We can make sure she
Right.
has the right things, and, we can guide her to medical providers here and those things. So I would put her in touch with a colleague through our association in
Hmm.
her hometown where her mom is. And then we
Hmm.
work together as a team to coordinate that, everything, the move, the assignment of location, helping with medical insurance. Now they're coming to a place their medical insurance isn't covered. How do we navigate that? And so it's our
Yes.
job to know, what do you think about when someone's relocating? Or what are the pros and cons of moving mom from home to an assisted living? What do I need
Hmm.
to ask when I do that?
Yeah.
So our job is to know all those things and get you quickly to the resource or the answer so that you can
Hmm.
make, critical decisions.
Yeah. And that's a really good example. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking is the scenario where a spouse is
Yeah.
caregiving for their
Right.
loved one and the spouse gets sick or injured, or they
Correct.
receive a diagnosis similar to what you were talking about with your aunt and uncle.
Yeah,
Then what do you do? If you're the
that's
one who
right.
has been providing the care and now you also need care,
That's right.
um, this
That's
service really, I think, comes in handy to,
Yeah.
it sounds
I mean,
trite,
very
but that's the
true.
best thing I can think of.
Yeah. And often our role with our clients in those cases are, we're getting to know them. We're doing our engagement with them to get to know both of them, their needs, their interests, all of the areas in which I mentioned earlier on. We're looking at all those aspects, including, what's their support system? What's their plan B? They may
Mhm.
have loved ones and but they're out of state. And
Mhm.
your point is absolutely a scenario we see more often than I would like. We have a spouse who's
Yes.
well, and all of a sudden we get a call because they're in the hospital and
Mhm.
their loved one is home alone and they're
Mhm.
not safe. And so ideally, if we're working with families, it's before that crisis because
Right.
we're helping put the plan in place. If this happens, then this is the home care we've vetted. This is, we sometimes in that spouse, or spouse with a diagnosis or a decline, we
Mhm.
introduce that concept of a caregiver coming in to
Mhm.
relieve them very early on, because that caregiver could be the emergency plan.
Mhm.
Now, my wife or husband with Alzheimer's has, this caregiver who comes twice a week, and he knows
Mhm.
this person now, and she knows him, and they're connected. So if something happens to me, that is already a safety net we put in place. And so
Hmm.
our agency, our life care advocates as a care management, team are helping to put those safety nets in place. And
Hmm.
so they know, or the daughter and son that are out of state know that the minute something happens, their first call goes to us, and our job is to coordinate all of that. One
Hmm.
of our team member might be going to the hospital to meet dad, and then we're sending the caregivers over to mom,
Yeah,
and we're updating daughter or son who can't get a flight out till tomorrow, and they feel better knowing we've got boots on the ground. So those are
right.
ways that those scenarios as well.
Yeah. Uh, So I was just thinking about how you mentioned Plan B and
Mhm.
how few people have Plan A,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's so true.
So, and as a fan of Friends, there's an
Yeah.
episode where
Oh,
they're
yeah.
talking about having plans, and Phoebe says, "I don't even have a plan."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I think a
Right.
lot of people find themselves
Yeah.
in that situation. Not only do they not
Yeah.
have Plan B, they don't have Plan A, and they
They didn't
might be
even,
blah.
yeah. They
Um,
know they should, but they haven't even begun.
right,
Yeah, and that's
right.
really true. Actually, in the evolution of what I've seen in the industry and in my practice specifically, is we are gratefully we're getting more and more clients who are coming to us earlier in their aging journey. We are getting what we call planning clients. So
Mhm.
some of these clients come to us because mom or dad came to us or their aging loved one in a crisis, and they
Mhm.
watched, and they knew how it impacted them. They
Yep.
watched the whirlwind and the fact that they realized we don't have a plan. We didn't
Hmm.
even talk about this because they seemed fine, and yet
Yeah.
now we're being called to know, what are their legal documents and who's the healthcare proxy or power of attorney, because we now need to write a check for
Hmm.
bills because mom or dad is unable.
Hmm.
They don't have any idea what insurances they have or who their financial person is. So they're scrambling. And
Yeah.
so, that's the now. And now, sadly, we see a lot of people without those legal documents specifically in place. And now
Yep.
someone is deemed unable to make decisions, mom or dad, because of a decline or a diagnosis or a crisis.
Hmm.
And now they may not be they can't now appoint you healthcare proxy because now they're not able, and
Hmm.
people end up in court with that. They end up having to go for guardianship, for instance,
Yep.
sometimes because family members aren't in agreement. And so when you have to head into court to get those kinds of authorities, you're talking about a significant cost difference, first of all. You're also talking about heartbreak in some cases because now you have to go in front of a judge and maybe in front of your parent that has lost capacity and argue for the fact that you should be in charge of them. These
Hmm.
things are not good. So the pl is fine, but you need to continue. You need to get the
Right.
plan. You need the plan A, and then you can work on plan B. But without a
Right.
plan A and having conversations early on with your loved ones, you could find yourself in a big bind, which can be
Yeah.
extremely costly. So we're guiding families earlier and earlier, families that, know something's changing, and so they're hiring an aging life care manager to say, we're seeing some nuances. We don't know quite what to do, but we need some help because we know we need to do something. Um, and so, really helping them and then helping them even have the conversations, coaching, how do you bring this up to mom or dad? How
Yep.
do you get mom on board? Because we are seeing dad decline. And we know mom has never, in certain generations, mom's never written a check. She
Hmm.
doesn't. She's not even, doesn't know where the bank is or what's in the post, in the safety deposit box or what insurance we have or what
Hmm.
investments dad's, been working on all these years. So, having those conversations is so important. And we guide people through that and help them have those conversations every day.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it, and there's great resources out there. I don't need to be, we don't need you to hire us endlessly to do that. We may meet with you for an hour, give you some tips and, take a look at this book or here's a podcast or an article or, so, it really is about just giving people, um, a starting point,
Yes.
and that is so critically important. I
Right.
think also one of the things that I think is so important and such a good tool is normalizing it. And very
Mhm.
often, having a conversation with my own, I'm very fortunate that so far, we have very open communication. I'm one of five girls. And so, although I'm at a distance from my own mom, I have two sisters who live within a 30-mile radius of her. She's
Mhm.
a retired nurse practitioner, tough as nails. Getting, I get somebody who's saying, I don't need help, or I don't want help, or no, you don't need to come to the doctors with me. I'm a retired professional who now we've been able to gently but firmly move on with, yeah, we do need to be there because
Mhm.
the medical system's changed. You're going to be in and out of a doctor's visit in 15 minutes. If you don't have your questions and feel confident and comfortable pushing against a doctor who, that generation, older generation has been told to respect. You don't
Yes.
question the doctor. They know what they're doing. And that
Mhm.
person's now leaving with, three specialists to see, four med changes and a mammogram at 87. You know,
Mhm.
you might have some other options, but, many older adults aren't asking the questions or pushing. So helping
Right.
to give some direction around that and to help families, with gently but firmly sharing their concerns, wanting to empower mom or dad to have input and impact in their care plan
Mhm.
before it's too late can often be a good way to approach it.
Yeah. It is so important to have that communication. And it is really difficult depending on
Yeah,
personalities,
yeah,
depending on generations,
yeah,
depending on the way your family interacts with one another.
that's right.
There are lots of families still who we don't talk about that.
That's correct. More than you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um, and I think that is the biggest thing that the more we talk about it out in the open,
Yeah,
regular conversations. I mean, you and
that's
I
right.
just met and, we've
Yep,
shared some very personal stories with
that's
caregiving
right.
and our families.
Yeah,
You have to start talking about these
yeah.
things because if you're dealing with it in silence, in a
Mhm.
silo,
Yeah,
it just makes it so much harder because there is help, there are
right.
resources, there are experts, and you deserve their support,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
so
You don't
true.
have to.
People feel very alone. They often they feel burdened with guilt because they
Mhm.
can't do everything and be everything.
Yep.
We're primarily women as caregivers, although the men are catching up. And quite
Mhm.
frankly, it's because there's too many older people in our circles not to have all hands on deck, and
Yes.
so, really feeling, supported and comfortable with
Mhm.
that role is imperative. I will say it one thing as we approach the holidays. I love families that, and you nailed it with, there are different, we all are in a different role in our family system. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're the youngest, no one's going to take you seriously if, that was your role, no matter if
Mhm.
you're a rocket scientist. So, we all know that. So,
Yeah.
part of understanding your family and the role you have is maybe there's one person who has a much better rapport with mom or dad to start the conversation. Maybe
Yep.
there's one person they will respond better to. We always tell people, as we head towards the holidays, Thanksgiving dinner is not the time to decide this is when we're going to gang up on mom or dad and get them to talk about this.
Mhm.
I've seen many a Thanksgiving dinners blow up because everybody felt like this is when we're all here, so we have to do it now. I would
Yeah.
tell you no. By and large,
Mhm.
we don't advise that unless you have a very open family system, very open conversations, and can tolerate that. But many
Yeah.
times, mom and dad are going to clam up and they're gonna buckle down and get defensive and say, "I don't need anything from you." Instead
Mhm.
of having a conversation conversation that opens a door. And, I always tell caregivers to lead with curiosity. Don't lead with a you can't or you have to, or
Yep.
that door is going to get slammed and probably locked.
Mhm.
You need to lead with, I heard on a podcast, I was talking with a friend, I wonder if you think about this. I'm thinking about it for myself and my husband. I wonder how you guys feel about it. I realize that, you might not be ready now, but I wonder when. What might be some things we could explore so that we're ready. We have a plan
Yep.
and you're in charge. So
Right.
those feel much more empowering to an older
Hmm.
adult that's run their whole life.
Yep.
They don't do well being told what to do, and none of us do. And
Yeah.
so allowing for it to be a conversation, not a dictatorship,
Right.
is critical, a critical advice.
Yeah. And that shift in the relationship is just as hard for them, if not harder,
That's
than it
right.
is for you. So, one of the things that you can do to piggyback off of your suggestion is to ask their advice. So, if you're thinking about this in for them, and you say, we've been talking about medical power of attorney. How did you do that? So then you can find out whether they've actually even done it.
Right. That's right. That's exactly
Um,
right.
and if they haven't, then you can say, well, I was looking through things and I think this is how it works. Have you heard? Do you know? And then you're more asking for their advice, but you're planting that seed with them and opening that door instead of slamming it shut and
Yeah.
locking it.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Absolutely. And I think it's just giving yourself permission as a caregiver to be vulnerable and give yourself grace because the
Yes.
best laid plans will happen. And the reality is that we need to say sorry. Last time we had that conversation, it got a little tense, or I appreciate
Mhm.
that I may have gone about that wrong. And, so also
Right.
owning that this is my first time with a 85-year-old mom, and I don't know how to do this either.
Yeah.
So, can we, try to talk about that, in a way that's
Right.
comfortable. So I think,
Yeah.
and then using support groups, podcasts, others in the space of caregiving also helps you not feel so all alone. And it's a
Yeah.
great way to get ideas. We're
Hmm.
better together. And there really is there's a huge cohort of people out there doing just what you're doing. And so not feeling alone and finding your people and support so you can take
Yes.
care of yourself is a number one.
Yes. Absolutely. So as people are considering this and thinking about their next steps, is there anything they need to do in their home to prepare for a caregiver to come in and help their
Sure.
loved one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. Caregivers typically, if you're having someone just come in days or, understanding that the more that they know how they can help, the better it will be
Mhm.
for both of you. So typically an agency that you're hiring will send somebody out to ask those questions initially. They should be getting to know you. They should, need understand what you need help with, understand what you're still, I'm very it's very important for me to have people also, what can you still do well? What do we want to make
Mm.
sure we're enhancing or giving you time to do? We often talk about offloading some of the things that aren't as easy or fun. Maybe food
Mhm.
shopping's horrible, but cooking's great. And so getting
Yeah.
the caregiver to go food shopping for you with the ingredients you need, and then you leading the cooking. Maybe you're teaching
Mhm.
them a recipe. So it is about knowing what you need help with, help be honest with that, and then
Mhm.
building that care plan. If you're having a caregiver come in that's there overnight, or that's there 24 hours a day, there are times when that's necessary. Then it's a little more important to make sure they have a place that they can sit, take a break for 15 minutes, eat lunch. What if somebody's truly in need of 24-hour care and they can't be left alone? Recognizing that that caregiver is going to need, you want to understand, do they bring their own food? Are you going to need to have food there? There's
Mhm.
different policies for different agencies and different expectations. But just understand the longer they're there, understanding, they'll need to use the bathroom. They'll what bathroom is
Right.
best for them to use. They'll need to have nourishment,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. They may need a minute or to have to take a family phone call. Understanding and what are the expectations of the agency, what's allowed, what isn't. People misunderstand too. They're coming in, they're not going to do heavy cleaning. They'll do light
Hmm.
cleaning, they'll do laundry, they'll do, but what can they do? What they can't they do? The
Hmm.
other one thing I would say is if a caregiver arrangement that is working for your loved one, there are potential for what's called a live-in. And this can be an appropriate measure for somebody who does not need someone with them all the time. Um, they don't necessarily need hands-on help. It's often useful for somebody who, either is a little bit frail and needs help periodically during the day, physically maybe, or somebody who is cognitively declined to a point of confusion. They might wander, they're not safe using the stove, those kinds of
Hmm.
things. But they can be in their house safely. They might be able to go for a walk around the block with the home health aide or somebody that's there. A live-in can be a cost savings,
Hmm.
but there's criteria. They need to be able to sleep, obviously. So you need a
Hmm.
space for them to sleep, a private space. They need to be able to take periodic breaks. So whether you have someone else come in or a family member that comes in so they can go take a break, take a walk, whatever. And they can't be woken all night long. It's similar to, they can be woken once or twice a night to help someone go to the bathroom and go back to bed, but they can't be
Hmm.
getting up so they don't get enough sleep to be able to care the next day. Much like when you had your, 2-year-old that needed to get up in the middle of the night, and you go cover them back up and settle them in
Hmm.
and you can go back to sleep. It's sort of that
Right.
expectation. But so there are different things that, you consider for different roles of that caregiver coming in,
Hmm.
which again, when we're working with a client, we're going to give you all that information. And often we're going to know your parent and you and what the wishes are. And we're going to relay that. We're going to take the burden off that communication. But families can very clearly, have a list of 5 or 6 things to be asking. And then what do you need in the house for the caregiver
Hmm.
to be comfortable and to succeed is the one of the
Yeah.
good questions.
Oh, so those are really great things to consider. One of the things you mentioned is the stuff that you can offload that maybe you don't enjoy so that the person who is being cared for finds things that they enjoy.
Right.
For caregivers, and people in your position,
Yeah.
see a lot of difficult situations and people at kind of their lowest moments. Where do you find joy? How do you
Yeah.
keep your sense of humor? Because
Yeah.
if you don't, it's a tough job.
Yeah. That is very true. We work in, as I said, I have a staff of about 17 folks, and I certainly in the early days, I was in the trenches, as a solo practitioner for very long. Um, and I would say, community is how caregivers and both people who are paid to do the work we do, but also professional caregivers and family caregivers is finding a way to connect. We in our practice and many people that do the work we do, we offer team support. We
Mhm.
help each other. My practice is a team. So if somebody's working with a client that now is in the hospital and another client is going to a medical appointment, we fill in for each other.
Mhm.
We work very hard in our company, which is reflective of what we know about the burden of caregiving, and sort of secondary trauma sometimes is
Yeah.
is being able to turn off and truly, covering for one of my team so they can take a weekend without looking at their phone or worrying about a client that they know is in a difficult situation or possibly at the end of life, backing each other up, really unplugging. Um,
Yes.
and, again, we see a lot of loss in the industry that we're in,
Hmm.
and very difficult situations. So, really honoring and acknowledging that together, and finding ways to bring in joy. We also do fun things together. We make a point of doing things
Hmm.
that bring joy. So, I think all of those things work and are critical to our job and being able to continue to do it well. But and we're also an objective person that are not emotionally tied. I say that, but that is impossible. We're working with people in their most intimate moments. And so, of
Yes.
course, we're connected with our clients, and we feel, we've had clients who we've worked with for a decade, all the way through
Mhm.
their passing. And, so of course we're connected, and those are losses for us too. So being
Yeah.
able to, take care of ourselves the way we advise and insist on the families that we work with do the same, it's all
Mhm.
relative to the work and to the journey.
Right. And that network you mentioned of supporting one another,
Yeah,
um, it is applicable and necessary for anyone who is caregiving. So
that's right.
whether you find your community um, on a podcast
Yeah,
or online,
yeah,
or you have neighbors or other folks in your family that you can talk to, finding some way to find that joy and that happiness. You're not going to feel it all the time. You're in a situation that is
yeah,
emotionally draining and mentally
yeah,
draining, but
yeah.
making sure that there are pockets and glimmers. Um,
That's right.
it is so essential because the caregiving journey isn't forever,
Yeah,
and there is life on the other side of it.
that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I echo exactly what you said. And that it gets easier with knowledge, support, and opportunity to take a break.
Right.
Those are important pieces.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you'd like the audience to know about aging life care or, hiring
Yeah,
professionals? Like, we've talked about a lot of
sure.
good things today.
Yeah. Well, I would direct them to the Aging Life Care website, and looking just even to get to know who's in their area. They may not need or feel like they want to engage an Aging Life Care manager at this moment, but like everything else, it's good to know where the resources are when you need them. It's
Yes.
it's a great idea to reach out ahead of needing them because it is a relationship just like anything else. And you want to find
Mhm.
somebody who feels like a fit. You need to ask questions about their work, their business model. How do they how do they engage, and what can we do together? Those
Mhm.
are all good questions as you vet that resource. The Aging Life Care website is www.aginglifecare.org. And it has right on the homepage, it says find an aging life care professional, big orange button, and you can put in a zip code, and then it should bring up people that are in your area. And you'll note that the people are listed. There's all the way from a fellow in the association, which are people who have a great deal of experience and longevity and are in the association. There are also all the way down to associates. And so there's criteria that's explained there, but each one of them, are there to serve you. They follow those code of ethics and standards of practice, and can be an invaluable resource as you tread the journey. All areas across the country don't have people if you're looking in Boston or if you're looking in New York City, you're going to find a lot of care managers, aging life care managers. If you're looking in some rural areas, you may have to go out 100 miles. You may have to, but regardless, many of us, I talk to people virtually. There's ways that you
Mhm.
can work with someone like myself, even to just get started.
Yeah.
So I hope people use that as a resource. I'm happy to be a resource, and obviously podcasts like this are going to be great things to help caregivers along.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We've been talking with Kate Granigan from Life Care Advocates in Boston, and she is the president of Aging Life Care Association. So thank you so much, Kate.
You're welcome. Thank you.